have no audio. Hi, hopefully this worked. I re-clicked things. I guess I'll start from the beginning. My name is Tara. Hopefully you guys can all hear me now. And I work at the Northern Rockies Museum. Okay, I've got audio on my feed now. This should be better. So I work at the Northern Rockies Museum, and I work with my amazing boss, Madison, who you will meet tomorrow when you guys do a really, really cool layered painting with her. So I know I mentioned it yesterday, but we are going to talk about voyageurs and astronauts today. So does anyone know what a voyager is? Anyone who's been to the museum, I'm sure you heard us talk about voyageurs before. In fact, if you've been to the museum, we have a hanging picture of a gentleman at our front door, and you can stick your head in and pretend to be him. He is a voyager. They were very important in our region, and we are going to discuss why and what they did and compare them with astronauts. And in the middle, we're going to stop and we're going to do some crafts. Today we're going to make a sextant, and we are going to make a sundial. And for those of you who bought a supply package, you can also make bottle rocket backpacks. I made one, and I know this sounds like an excuse, but my dog, who really likes bottles, stole it and ate it last night, which was very nice of her. And I simply didn't have time this morning to make a new one. So there are pictures so that you can make one and follow along, but I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be able to make a pop bottle rocket with you today because my dog ate my homework. I promise you, she did. She's nice. So we're going to hide the supply list screen. Hi, now I'm huge. And we are going to move over to my slideshow. And I'm going to change it. There we go. Perfect. I've got props today too. We've got cool things to look at. So, history of stars, discoverers of yesterday and today with our very cool merged astronaut and voyager. I adore him. So here is a picture. Yeah, the dog really did eat my homework. I know. So here is a picture of a voyager. He was a boatman employed by the fur companies, who were the reason that Canada opened up, in transporting goods like furs and passengers like explorers, like David Thompson, who was in this region, and dignitaries to and from the different trading posts in Canada. An astronaut, or a cosmonaut, is a person trained by a human spaceflight program, NASA, to command, pilot, or serve as a crew member of a spacecraft. They look very different. So, the question that I want you guys to think about while we go through this is, why are they both so important to the discovery of new places? What do they do? So, the New World, can any of you recognize Canada in this map? Can any of you see it? If you look really closely, you can see Quebec, you can see Hudson's Bay, you can kind of make out Vancouver Island and the western shore, you can kind of see where Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick are. So the New World was completely unknown to Europeans. They'd never been here. So they sent their toughest and strongest men to endeavor across the land and see what there was, because they'd never been here before. They didn't know. So they were also transporting furs back to Europe and other tradable items across the country to engage with the indigenous people and learn how to survive in this inhospitable country. If you look out your window right now, this is what they saw too, except they were coming from places far warmer and they were not used to being here, so they needed help. So that's what they were trading for with indigenous people when they first came. Switch this. Astronauts, on the other hand, explore space. Only the smartest and the strongest people get to go to space as astronauts or cosmonauts. They need to be able to spend a lot of time alone. So I bet they're doing better than we are in this whole isolation, quarantine kind of thing. So they also need to be in inhospitable conditions. It's not a place where humans live in space or in the International Space Station. And they bring back information to Earth about what they've seen for all of us to learn about. Without voyagers and astronauts, we would know absolutely nothing about the new worlds that we are discovering. Pretty amazing. So, we're going to go through and compare what each of them wear. What kind of equipment do they use? So voyagers were free to wear whatever they wished, but by 1801, which was, can anybody tell me how long ago that was? 219 years ago. Almost all of their clothing, or sorry, 199 years ago. It's been a very long day. Almost all of their clothing came from a single source. And I'm doing that math wrong again. Don't tell anyone I'm a math tutor. This is shameful. All their clothing came from a single source, their employers. The Northwest Trading Company Voyagers received clothing as part of their employment contract, in addition to their regular wages. Kind of like sometimes we get personal protective equipment as part of our pay. It's included. Make sure we have hard hats and steel toe boots. And so this is very similar. So sometimes other items that they received on top of clothing were tobacco, knives, beads, and vermilion. And there go my markers. So voyagers were well known for wearing their red toques, or blue, and a sash around their waist to hold their knife and their smoking bag. So these were their beautiful pants and their sash, which is like this one. These were finger woven, and I have some finger weaving that I've done to show you, but mine is nowhere near as good as this. And they would wear these sashes to hold things, but these were also incredibly useful. They could tie up wounds with them. They could wrap up equipment and tools with them. And these guys were lifting heavy, heavy, heavy items for very long distances. And something can sometimes happen to your internal organs when you do that. Your stomach wall can't handle the pressure. And so sometimes your internal organs pop out a little bit, and it's called a hernia. So they would tie this around their waist as tight as they could to shove their body parts back inside and then keep doing their job. Crazy and amazing. These guys were so tough, which I think is amazing. So this was their sash, and then their beautiful pants. They're not even really pants. They're called breeches with leggings. And instead of shoes, they wore winter and summer moccasins, which we saw at the beginning. And they would wear what they called blanket socks to keep their feet warm, which of course they had to trade out and dry as often as they could, because I think we all know what happens when we have wet feet. Nothing good. They would also have these kinds of coats, and you can see from the ad that I've put up that the Hudson's Bay Company was incorporated in 1670. That's a long time ago. And they sold these coats, very fetching, and they are made in a pattern that we all now know as a Hudson's Bay blanket. And in fact, if you come to the museum, you will see that we have a Hudson's Bay blanket coat on display, and we also have a Hudson's Bay blanket, which I would love to take home. Madison didn't hear that. No. So on the tie also, I forgot to tell you, the fringed ends were also used as thread as an emergency sewing kit, which I think is pretty darn cool. They used those things for anything and everything. They also carried beads, they had their knives, they had vermilion, they had their tobacco pouches. They were very flamboyant, but it was all also very useful. This fetching gentleman I've already mentioned, his name was David Thompson, and in 1807 and 1808, his order for the Northwest Trading Company's Columbia Department included cotton and flannel shirts. And a few years later, he took 15 men's cotton shirts, 6 fine cotton shirts, and 3 fine calico shirts over the Athabasca Pass, which is near us, which is pretty cool. So now we're going to check out astronauts. We're going to see what they wear. And I'm going to turn on this quick little video, and we will check out how they get into what they wear. She's a lot of layers, doesn't she? And she can't get dressed by herself either. She even has to have a frame hold her up. She weighs too much. So why do you think they're putting her in a pool? There she goes. So they put her in a pool. Why do you think they did it? Well, it's because we can't mimic how little we weigh in space, which is actually nothing because it's a vacuum. On Earth, we have gravity that puts pressure on us, so we can't actually put mass on us. And so we have to fake it to train astronauts. So they put them in the pool where it kind of gives them buoyancy and it gives them a feeling of what it feels to move without having anything holding them back. A little. It's not perfect. But did you notice how many things she has to wear? Because space is an incredibly challenging place to explore. It's not a place that humans can go. So there's no air, there's nothing to breathe. It's very cold unless the sun is shining on you. And then it's really hot. And without air to protect you, the rays from the sun can actually burn you. So it's not a safe place for humans. So to survive, you need a suit that protects your body from the heat and the cold and surrounds you with air to breathe. Spacesuits are pressurized, meaning they're full of air. That's why they look all blobby. To support your body, which is why they look all puffed up. And a spacesuit like this one is actually like a tiny spaceship for one person. It's a very complicated machine with air conditioning, heating, air to breathe, water to drink, and it even has a built-in toilet. Okay, look at the picture and tell me where you think they might have a built-in toilet. Some spacesuits attach to a rocket-powered backpack, which allows the astronaut wearing it to fly around space in small bursts. It's not like on the Lego Worlds game where you see that astronaut flying through space and he has no spaceships around. But if they're on the International Space Station and they need to get from one spot to another very quickly, they're tethered so they don't go shooting off into nowhere, and they kind of just give a little burst. It's like helping them jump, and then they get up and over. It's pretty cool. So what else do they wear? Because they don't just walk around wearing those spacesuits. Nowadays, most astronauts don't need to wear spacesuits all the time. When they're traveling in the space shuttle or visiting the International Space Station, they wear these simple blue overalls. Or even their own clothes. But they do still wear their familiar white suits if they need to go out into space to fix a satellite or do experiments. When they're on the space station, they wear clothes like this. And I want you guys to take a look at her legs. Do you guys see anything that's kind of special about her legs? What's on her pants? Can you guys tell me? Do you see anything on her pants? What is it? What's it for? Any thoughts? Well, she has Velcro on her pants. That's right, she has Velcro. Why does she have Velcro on her pants? Well, we're going to get to that. I will tell you in a minute. So, the most commonly seen spacesuit these days is their orange spacesuits, just like these. They wear it during takeoff and landing to protect the crew if there's a problem with air in the shuttle itself while they're going up to space or they're coming back to Earth. The suit's orange so that if the crew has to parachute out of the spacecraft in an emergency, it's easier for them to be found. Things in nature aren't generally orange and gigantic like that. So if they're in the middle of the ocean, it's probably pretty easy to find them. So we are now going to talk about what kind of food voyageurs and astronauts eat. We're going to compare the two. Does anybody know what that is? Any thoughts? Well, voyageurs needed a lot of food, but they couldn't carry it because it weighs too much. Have you ever been to the grocery store and your mom bought a lot of food and then you had to help carry it inside? It's heavy. It takes a lot of work. So they couldn't carry all of that. They only had canoes or big boats. They couldn't fit all the food that they needed to eat. So they needed to find small food that had a lot of calories in it. And they only ate 2 large meals a day. There was no snacking. I know we're all snacking too much while we're in social isolation, but there was no snacking. So after paddling for 3 hours, they would stop at 8 in the morning for breakfast that they made the night before, which means they started paddling at 5 a.m. So they would paddle for 3 hours, and then they would stop for breakfast, and they would have pork, beans, and biscuits made of flour and water, kind of like bannock. And around 2 o'clock, they would have a second meal of pemmican, which is what this is. Jerky tastes way better than pemmican. So then, for dinner, like a big meal, when I say they had a snack, I mean while they're paddling, they would shove pemmican in their face. It's not like they sat down and calmly had a lovely little break as a snack. No, no. So for dinner, they would often have this, which is called hominy. And they would have more pemmican. Ugh. Does anyone know what pemmican is Pemmican is actually a big strip of a meat, usually buffalo at the time, and they would cover it in fat and then pound on it with hammers. I do go into this. And then they would put berries in it. It's not good. I've had it. It's not good. So this gets turned into a hominy, which is what this is. So it's dried peas, cornmeal, and more pemmican, and mixed with bacon fat or bear grease, which gave it a better taste. Yeah. So let's look at astronauts real quick here. Oh, no, I have this one. My apologies. This is pemmican. What you're seeing on the right side is a pemmican hammer. And so they would literally take a strip of meat, and they would cover it in fat and then use that hammer to pound the fat into the meat. And then if they had them, they would have berries like Saskatoon berries or blueberries or usually a very firm berry. Raspberries were sometimes used, but they're very wet. Wild strawberries could sometimes be used. And so that was what they ate because it's very high in fat. And it's also incredibly shelf stable. We have a picture on our Instagram page, if you've never seen it, that has a brick of pemmican. And it says, also suitable for dogs on it. Incredibly high quality, high calorie food. It just doesn't taste very good, at least in my experience. And I've read historical comments on it, and none of them are like, yes, my favorite meal ever. No. So let's look at some astronaut food. What do you guys think astronauts eat when they're in space? Do you think they can eat regular food? Do you think they can only eat like space ice cream? Do you think space ice cream is actually a thing? Let's find out.
The foods that they eat in space are very much like foods that we eat on Earth. They're processed and packaged a little bit differently in space.
But some things are probably incredible better than others.
Yeah, so things that
Daisy!
would have a lot of crumbs.
Sorry, it's my dogs.
You don't want to open something and have a lot of crumbs. Yeah, so things that break easy when it tips really travel so long in space. A lot of the snack type foods, low moisture foods that we use are from the grocery store. And we repackage them so that you can see if they broke, so you don't have issues with crumbs in space, and also to give them individual serving sizes in case something were to break, like a cracker.
The way the food is packaged actually helps it last longer.
Yes. So this is a granola bar in its primary package, and for ISS missions, International Space Station missions, we actually put them in an overwrap that has aluminum, and these packages together greatly reduce the oxygen and moisture transfer into the food, and they reduce rancidity. Some crew really.
So they eat exactly what we eat on Earth, but they have a few rules. If it can make crumbs, it's not allowed. Why do you think that is? Why do you think if it has crumbs, they shouldn't have it? Well, think about what happens in space. Think about what happens when you see those people floating around. Yeah, you like the dog. Thanks, Leanne. Think about what happens in space. If you're eating a cracker and it gets all crumbly, where are those crumbs going to go? Where are they going to go? They're going to go everywhere. And then how do you get them? If you have time later, Google what happens to water in space, and you can watch astronauts wring out a washcloth, and the water does the most amazing thing. So here are some of the packages that they use when they're in space. And to eat the apricot drink and the lemonade, the iced tea lemonade, they actually put a straw in the end and they just suck it up real quick. Do you think they could tear it open and expose the juice to the air when they're on the International Space Station? No, because it would float everywhere. I promise you. You Google that, what happens to water on a washcloth in space. It's worth the watch. So here is how they would serve their food. They also get condiments. They get ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise in little teeny packets. Salt and pepper can be used too, but they have to be in liquid form. Otherwise, the same problem with crackers, they would just float away. And then how do you capture salt and pepper in space? So drinks are dehydrated and they're kept in powder form, and they have built-in straws, like I said. So they just add some water from a machine that goes straight in because they can't just pour the water because, again, Google washcloths and water. It's very cool. So to make sure that their food doesn't float off, can you see on this tray those white squares? We're back to what we saw on her pants. What are they using to hold their food onto that tray so that it doesn't all float away? Well, they're using Velcro and magnets because they need to hold all of those items onto their tray. Otherwise, they would float off and they'd have to go find them. And these trays mean that they can actually sit down and enjoy a meal. Some freeze-dried fruits look like this. You can eat them dry. In my house, a favorite is freeze-dried corn. It tastes so sweet. It's like candy. My children love it. In fact, you could regularly be eating astronaut food without even knowing it. So today, many breakfast cereals include freeze-dried fruit, like strawberries that are delicious and add color and flavor. So now we are going to look at the equipment that transported Voyagers and astronauts and compare them. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in the comments. Madison is watching. She's more than happy to answer all of your questions in the comments, or if I see them, I'm happy to answer them here as well. Hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let's have a look at Voyager and astronaut equipment. So here is something called Canal du Nord, or the North Canoe, and it was used west of Lake Superior. Lake Superior is where? It's in Ontario. So this boat weighed about 25 feet, it was about 25 feet long and 4 feet wide, and it weighed about 300 pounds when it was fully loaded. But it could carry 25 to 30 pieces of 90-pound packages. That's how much it could carry, plus the people. Absurdly large, absolutely absurd. The crew was 4 to 8 men, with 5 to 6 being the average. And it was carried on portages by 2 men. Do you guys know what it means to do a portage? So I used to whitewater canoe, and portages were my nightmare. But they were on every single river. So whenever you're on a river, you're always going to come across an area that you cannot paddle. Either it's rapids, or it's rocks, or it's shallow. It's just dangerous. So you literally have to park your canoe, carry all of your stuff down a path along the side of the river to the end where you can get back in, and then go back and get your canoe and carry it. Now imagine there are 5 to 6 of these guys, and they are carrying 90 pounds back and forth, and the longest portage on the Voyager journey across Canada was 14 kilometers. So it's 14 kilometers just to drop off your stuff. Then you have to go 14 kilometers back, pick up more stuff because you couldn't do it all in one walk. And they would do this up to 6 times before they could get the canoe moved. No, thank you. That's not a job I want. But these men did it. They were amazing. Here's what a bundle usually looked like. These ones were marked with the Hudson's Bay Company. And the way that these guys would carry it was using what's called a tump line. I think that's my next slide. No, I'm just going to skip ahead. This is a tump line, or a collier, or a portage collar. So I've made one that I made from finger weaving. So this is my tump line. I've done a double strap, and then I have a natural jute twine that I'm using. It's 8 feet long on the straps. I've made mine smaller because I'm not tying it at the bottom. And they would literally put it across their forehead, put the heavy bags behind them, so it would look like this. And the weighted bundles would be on their back, and they would carry it with their forehead because their back and their neck were stronger than their arms. So they would carry it with these. And I've tried this. And you have to bend over really far, so you're kind of walking crouched over. It's incredibly uncomfortable, but your back is stronger than your arms. So this is what they would do. Quite amazing, I think. If you're bored later, you should look up finger weaving. This is just made with yarn from home, if you have any extra yarn, and you can learn how to finger weave. And I would love to see pictures of what you try to make if you do look up how to finger weave online. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool too, Malaya. So we'll go back. These are the paddles that they would use. So there are all sorts of different paddles. Depended where they were, depended what they were doing, which paddle they wanted. There's one specifically called the Voyager. It has a longer flat blade, which was better on open water, but they also had extra paddles depending on where they were for what they would use. Whitewater paddles are what I would use. They are made from plastic. That is not what they would use. Some Voyageurs had a bent shaft. They were very particular about their paddles, and they protected them. They were the equipment that they absolutely relied on, and if they lost their paddle, they had to go make a new one, which is not an easy thing to do. So they tried really hard not to do that. And on to astronaut equipment. I think we all recognize what this is. This is the space shuttle. Let's see what else we use as an astronaut. Does anybody know what this is? This is national pride for anyone who doesn't know what this is. You can kind of see it there. It looks like an arm. There's your hint. What do you think it is? This is the Canadarm. This is the Canadarm. This was invented by Canadians, and it is essential, and on every single space shuttle, it is on the International Space Station. The Canadarm is an outstanding piece of equipment that was designed by Canadians, and everyone should be very proud of this. So, voyageurs, to find their way around the country that they've never been to, used this piece of equipment, which is called a sextant. And I actually have one right here. So this is a sextant, and it measures the angle of a celestial body, which means a point in the sky, like a star, a planet, a sun, or the moon. And you measure the angle that it makes with the visible horizon. And the horizon is where the sky meets the land. So you would hold it up and look through this telescope. These are filters so that if you're looking into the sky when the sun is out, because you never, ever, ever look into the sky when the sun is out, because what will happen to your eyes? You're going to hurt your eyes. So you look through, you adjust the plumb line, and then you lock it, and then you take your measurements. So we're going to pause right here, and we are going to make our own. So for all of you who have our kits, we're going to make me big here so that I can do the sextant with you guys. Let's hide this. Hi. So we are going to make our own sextant. And when you're done, it's going to look like this. So for all of you who have your printable, you have a protractor cut out. I want you to cut it out. It's just this fan shape. I've asked for a weighted object. I used a button. So let everybody take a second and cut out your protractor. And then you're going to use a couple of pieces of tape, and you're going to put your straw along the edge. You're going to punch a hole in the bottom corner of your protractor underneath the train symbol, and you're going to tie a piece of yarn. Ask your mom and dad for help if you need help. And on the other hand, you're going to hang something that's got a little weight to it. A button, a washer, an old earring, something that has some weight so that it pulls the string. And then you're going to use this exactly the way that you would use a real sextant. You're going to hang it like this, and you're going to use the straw to find a celestial body. You can also use the top of a tree so that you can practice. And you're going to find it, and then you're going to pinch the yarn, and then you're going to measure the zenith angle. So there's full instructions here on this printout. We have full instructions how to use your sextant, and then we also have a sheet where you can keep track of all of your measurements and find out how things are moving through the night sky. My daughters have been doing it for a few days and they're trying to track Polaris. It doesn't move, but they'll learn that. So you're going to mark down your compass direction. So what I want you to do when you decide to go outside and try out your sextant is I want you to find out where north is. And you can use a compass. If you don't have a compass, you can actually make one. If you don't have one, you can Google how to make your own magnet, or your own compass, I'm sorry. You magnetize a needle, you put it on an eraser, and you float it in water, and it'll actually find north. So if you have a compass, you're going to rest it on the back of your hand, and then you're just going to let it do its magic. But outside, away from magnetic things if you can. And then wherever the red points, that's north. And where I live, north is over there. So then I want you to find east, south, and west. And then I want you to find your celestial body that you're looking at and find its compass direction. And then you're going to mark it down. And then you're going to mark the zenith angle, which is what you get off of your sextant. And then your altitude angle is your zenith angle minus 90. Don't worry, all the instructions are right here. And if you have any trouble with this, send me a private message. I'd be more than happy to help you out. And if you do this every night for a few nights, you can actually figure out how things move across the sky, how quickly they move across the sky, and where they're going. It's very fun. And because we're all stuck in the house, this is a really great science experiment. And for any of my Girl Guides who are watching, you let me know you did this and you got badges coming your way. So there's a lot of good stuff here. So again, if you have any questions, let us know. Put them in the comments if we're really confusing you. But this is very fun. And this is how explorers actually mapped our country. Do you remember that map that I showed you at the beginning that kind of looked old and it had some weird lines? They actually mapped our country really well and knew where they were using only a sextant and a compass. Now we use satellites and GPS and, oh, excellent, Ariana, I love it. We don't need those anymore. But 200 years ago, they were using sextants and compasses and basic algebra and calculus to figure out what the land looked like, where they were in relation to it, and how it worked. I'm in awe. So we're going to bring up our cool image again. So here are the parts of a sextant. You don't need to know them. This is just for fun. But it includes a telescope, which is the straw on the version that we're making at home. And then it has a half-silvered mirror that the telescope looks through, and that helps you find the horizon. And then there's a moving arm for the index mirror, which is on the bottom. And then there's a micrometer knob so that you can make minor adjustments because you need to be incredibly precise when you're using a sextant to do professional maps. Obviously, ours isn't going to be that precise, but I cannot wait to see what you guys are tracking through the sky and what you find out about where they go and how they get there. I'm really excited to find out. So I'm going to make this big again so that I can move us to the next screen. So telescopes were used to collect this image to give people the chance to see objects in space more clearly. Because when you look up at the night sky, we're very lucky. If you're listening in Hinton, we don't have a lot of night light pollution. We have a little bit, but it's not terrible. If you're in the city, there's a lot of light pollution. So we actually get to see a lot of the night sky. Sometimes we even get to see the northern lights. We get to see a lot of the sky, but there's so much more. So if we use telescopes, if any of you are lucky enough to have a telescope at home, take some time to take a look at the sky and tell me what you see. I would love to hear about it. This is an example of an older telescope, but now we use modern equipment to look at the sky. A telescope is something that they would have used while they had sextants or while they were using sextants, but now we use more complicated things like this. This is a spectrometer, and this actually tells us information about the light. It can tell the temperature of an object in space, which direction it's traveling, how fast it's going, its weight, and even what it's made of, just by the light and how they play with it using a spectrometer. And what do you think this is? This is a special kind of telescope. There are lots of different kinds of special telescopes because not all light can reach space. Sorry, not all light from space can reach Earth. So astronomers use different tools to try to collect them. So let's take a look. This is a radio array. If you were with me yesterday, you heard me talk about this and how they're listening for ET. Well, they're listening for ET using this radio telescope array. It looks like a field full of gigantic telescopes, and they're just listening for sounds. This very cool piece of equipment is called a space balloon, and it goes up as high as it can, almost into space. Not quite though, but as high into the atmosphere as it can. And you can see on the bottom that there's a data collection system. There's a telescope, there's probably all sorts of little scientific machines on there that feeds back information so that people can learn more about space without actually having to go there. This is the Hubble Telescope. Have any of you heard of the Hubble Telescope? I love the Hubble Telescope for the images that it sends back. I showed you guys a picture yesterday when we were looking at Orion's Belt of the Horsehead Nebula. That picture came from the Hubble Telescope. Some of the best pictures that we've ever seen from space have come from this telescope. So then this is a satellite in space, of which there are tens of thousands probably. If you look at a picture of space from Earth now, it's kind of dirty because it's floating with old satellites and new satellites. And satellites are what allow us to have cell phones. They allow us to have Wi-Fi. They feed information from one part of the planet to another. They're all very cool. This is what's doing it. Then what is this thing? Does anybody? I've talked about it. Do you know what it is? This is the International Space Station. People live on this thing. The Hubble bubble, yeah. So the International Space Station, I'll give you some fun little facts about it. It actually orbits the Earth, which means it goes all the way around every 92 minutes. So how long is that? It's an hour and a half plus 2 minutes. Look, I can do that math. It's actually a huge laboratory where astronauts and scientists can learn more about living in space and the effects of zero gravity on equipment and on people, because we don't actually know what happens to people when they're in space for a long time. The only way to find out is to actually go to space and try it. So they do experiments on board the space station to help us learn more about space and how to survive long space voyages. The reason nobody's ever been to Mars is because we don't actually know how to do it. We don't know what's going to happen to our bodies if we're in space for that long. What's going to happen to our muscles? What's going to happen to our food? What's going to happen to the ship? So we have to practice, and that's what the International Space Station is doing. Can any of your mom and dads recognize this? It's older than all of us, I know. This is the Lunar Lander. There are many types of landers. In Mars right now, they're using a lander that also includes what they call the Mars rover, which is roaming around Mars and collecting dirt. And it's got all sorts of scientific equipment on it that's taking pictures and images and sending it all back to Earth so that we can learn more about Mars and what it's like. But the Lunar Lander was actually used to carry people and instruments to the surface of the moon. And it actually collected rocks and soil, and it took it back to Earth so that we could learn more about the moon, which is a cool thing in our sky that we get to look at. So landers, as I said, have also landed on Mars. But now I'm wondering, so the Voyagers and the astronauts work really, really hard. So they have to sleep. But how? So the first thing, Voyagers, those poor guys, we saw how hard they worked. They would literally tip their canoes onto the side, and then they would curl up underneath it on top of moss or rocks or spruce boughs, whatever they could to try to make a comfy bed. And that's how they would sleep. And they would tilt the canoe so if it was raining or it was really hot, it would protect them a little bit. Because there were mosquitoes back then too, and you can guarantee that those smelly, sweaty guys were getting eaten alive. So now, astronauts. Let's watch Chris Hadley. Does anybody know who he is? I love him. He's amazing. He was the captain of the International Space Station. He is also Canadian, and he's also really fun to watch. So he is going to show all of us how astronauts sleep in space.
Hi,
Chris Hadfield here aboard the International Space Station.
Hadfield, not Hadley.
Keep busy on board the space station. Long days, lots of work, physical exercise. At the end of it, you're tired. But how do you sleep in space? In order to make it comfortable for the astronauts, originally they were going to put us all in one habitation module with sleep stations all around it. But the way a station was eventually built, we have sleep stations inside Node 2, which is the forward part of the station, and inside the service module, which is in the aft. A total of 6 small bedroom sleep stations, sleep pods. And inside each one is just a sleeping bag tied to the wall. You might think it's uncomfortable not having a mattress and a pillow, but without gravity, of course, you don't need anything to hold you up. You can just completely relax. And you don't even need a pillow. In space, you don't even have to hold your head up. So you can relax every muscle in your body, and your arms float up in front of you. Your head tips forward. But before I go to sleep, I gotta put on my pajamas, because I have space jammies. I'll be right back.
Space jammies.
I'm in my super comfy Russian full-length pajamas. Nice for when you have to get up in the middle of the night, and ready to go to bed. I'll show you where I sleep. This is my sleep station, my sleep pod. This is where I spend up to 8 hours every day here on board the space station. It's actually on the floor, but once you're inside, you just can't tell.
Pretty cool, right, guys? And this final image that I have for you is actually a picture of our solar system, which I am in awe of, and I just like looking at because it's gorgeous. So back to me. Hi. We have one more craft to do together really quickly. So nowadays, when we need to tell the time, we have a watch. I have a watch right here. Everybody has a watch. I bet your mom and dads all have cell phones. There's watches on there too. They have clocks on their phones. In fact, watch sales are down because of it. So, what did voyageurs use to tell the time? They probably didn't care, but other people did. If you worked at the trading post, you certainly cared what time it was. So what did they use? Well, they used a sundial, and in your printouts, we have one. And I say a sundial, they had watches, but only the wealthiest, and sometimes they got damaged, and they had to have a backup. So we are going to cut out our sundial very quickly, and I just dropped my glue, so excuse me for a second. So, scissors, cutting out sundial, which I haven't done yet, which maybe I should have. Sorry, I fiddled with my screen. So, cut along the dotted lines so you can see where all the dotted lines are, and then fold along the yellow lines. I think we can all do that. And this is actually called a gnomon. So then fold along any solid yellow lines around the sundial, except for the diagonal latitude lines. We actually need to figure out what our latitude is, and I've already looked it up for you. If you are in Hinton, our latitude is 53.4 degrees. Why does latitude matter, do you think, when you're doing a sundial? Why do you think it matters to know what your latitude is? Well, the sun is on a different level of the horizon, depending on your latitude. If you live close to the equator, the sun is right on top of you all the time. Have you noticed in the wintertime that the sun is actually pretty low on the horizon? And if you live north of the, let's say, the Arctic Circle, there's times of the year when the sun never actually breaks the horizon at all. They call that dark winter because it's just dark all the time. So did you guys all get it folded? So we're also going to cut out the gnomon, which is this. It's kind of the nose piece. And it's what creates the shadow that tells you what time it is. You do need to know where north is. So remember, I told you about your compass work and finding out where north is. You can also cheat and Google it. You made it already? That's fantastic. I love it. Have you tried it? See if it works. So then we're going to fold it along the glue tabs, and then you're going to glue it, right here, like this. And then I want you to fold your sides at 53 degrees latitude, which is kind of halfway between 50 and 54. 50 and 55, I'm sorry. So that it sits like this with your gnomon on top. Then you are going to face this north. So in my case, right out my window is north. In Hinton, it's towards Grand Cache or the Obed Hills that is north, if that helps. Okay. And you can glue all of this, but I'm just folding it to be quick. I've kept you here for long enough. Okay, just like this. And then you're going to put your gnomon on it, face it. You need the brightest sun that you can. Today it's really cloudy. It's not going to work very well because it doesn't create a shadow. You really need to have a shadow for this, but then you will have your little sundial. And you can keep track. You can say, I checked it, and it told me it was 12:30. Try to check it at the same time every day and see how accurate it is. Compare it to the clock on your stove. See if it actually works. I would love to hear. I would love to see. And that's kind of it today. Oh, the happy thought jars. I hope everybody is continuing to put an item in your happy thought jar. And today I haven't, but it might be that today I have no laundry. For the moms and the dads, you totally feel me. Today I'm caught up. I just have a basket that I need to fold, which is fine. Yes, you can also test it with a flashlight. My apologies. So I hope everybody enjoyed History to Stars. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, we would love to hear it. We would love to see pictures of your sextants, and I would love to hear how your explorations of celestial bodies in the sky and how they are moving is working for you. We are on our Facebook page. We would love to hear from you. Please share our program with your friends. Tell them what we do. We have a YouTube channel where we're also promoting these videos. We would love to share this with as many people as we can. We hope you're having fun. Please feel free to comment and tell us how you think we can do it better, because we are always trying to improve. Tomorrow you will be with Madison making an absolutely incredible layered star painting. And I can't wait to follow along because I'll hopefully maybe learn how to be more artistic. That would be great. So as always, stay safe. Much love. We will see you soon.